Yo.
All right. Um, First of all, good afternoon, everybody. Just a quick little introduction. My name is Chris Becker. I live in San Antonio, Texas, part of Bexar County with Bear LP. Y'all probably know J.R. Hasloff is the chairman here. Um, I have run for San Antonio City Council the last couple of cycles. Uh, 2 years ago, I had I call her a progressive corporatist incumbent and the GOP MAGA favorite in front of me. And I managed to get a little over 11% of the vote. This time, with neither of them, our incumbent decided to run for mayor, and the MAGA for GOP lady did not run, though she did film an endorsement video for me. She did not run. Um, and there was eight of us to fill an open seat, and I came within 146 votes of making the runoff. I was less than 2% out of first. It was a very competitive race. There was the top four and the bottom four. The top four were 20, 19, 18, and 17% of the vote, and then there was the rest. Um, so it's progress last time. Um, I tell people that my feelings about the election after the election are more intense, both on the positive and the negative side. Um, and Jacob did ask me to do this a couple months ago. That was that was when we were in the throes of the campaign, which I love doing. I love going through that, and so um, I wanted to share a couple of things that I thought were important running the campaign. I'm not going to have any fancy graphics. You're just going to get to look at me and listen to me. But there are four big points that I wanted to hit on and elaborate on, and then we can discuss. I can try to answer questions if you like. Um, Also, should be noted, I teach AP Government and financial literacy to eighth and ninth graders full time, and I teach economics part time on the community college at a local community college. Just to get that out there. Got four daughters. I'm not going to go. I'm not going to elaborate on them because I'll spend the whole time talking about them. Um, four points I want to hit on today, uh, as far as how I how I how I try to run a campaign, how I think a campaign, what is optimal. One is to know your shit. Two, stockpile volunteers. Three, be mindful whether or not it's a partisan race. And four, be involved in the community. Um, to the first point about knowing your stuff. I didn't have these in any particular order. um, it's the first time I ran, I thought I needed to. When I decided to run, I decided to try to get versed in the nuts and bolts. I knew local government was, characterized as mundane and it's not as sexy as the national stuff. So I figured, okay, I need to learn about zoning. I need to know about trash pickup, stray animals, that kind of thing. Um, Turns out that that those those weren't big themes in that particular. This was back in 2021. Um, Back then, the issues that dominate are just the headlines, the stuff that's going to grab headlines. And so I was kind of relieved at that point. So I can talk about that kind of stuff, which it's helpful to know about the body you're going for, whether it's council or school board or county or something like that. But it's just as important if you have a good philosophical or value based foundation. And, that's one thing that we generally have over other party. parties. We have that and we stick to it. So I found myself, even though I was still learning about local stuff. I could pivot to theory and speak in an ideal sense. So I was kind of relieved about that. Um, if you continue to stay plugged in, you'll pick up the rest over time. But you have to. I'm not the kind that somebody says, "Hey, we need to have somebody. Why don't you run for?" I've had several people suggested that I run for school board, presumably because they like me not in the way. And I was like, that's not where my head's at. Um, so I've been following council stuff, city stuff for the most part for the last couple of years. So it helps to know your stuff. And this breaks down in a couple of different ways also that I've learned. There's the general election and then the possibility of a runoff. The general election is going to be more inclined to some of that high level stuff, some of the theoretical stuff. Just it's still going to be helpful to know some of the nuts and bolts and some of the details so you can speak to it. But the general election, it's a little more high level, and I say that mainly because I've seen how runoffs are conducted now, and I've been to I've attended a couple of runoff debates, and there, at least the questioners, one of our primary local media news outlet has run these. It's not the newspaper because they cover all of it. They cover national, state, and they have a lot of advertisements in their system, or they put a bunch of that on there. But the runoffs still give more detail. And so if you think there's a chance you could get into a runoff, it's very important to know some of these details. I've learned that attending a few of these debates. So just know your stuff. And again, me personally, I go to where my head's at. My head's in the council. I'm not going to run for school board or anything like that until I genuinely get interested. That's just not me. Let's see. Related to that, I'm going to try to put these together in a nice flow, is to be involved in the community. Not get involved, be involved. For the longest time, I was just a hermit. I was mainly focused on DC, and then the lockdowns happened. That's what got my attention on the local scene, and that's what pushed me in. That's what pushed me in to run the first time. And best I recall, I think the most I was teaching at that time. I was teaching part time, so I was out there, in the evenings doing something other than my regular job. And I think, I'm not sure if I'd started volunteering for my daughter's band yet, and I certainly wasn't involved in the community that much yet. But after that first time, me, a couple former candidates and activists formed a group that some of you may have heard of if you talk to JR or Carter. It's called Infuse SA. We just focus on local stuff. We exist to advance personal and economic freedom for all citizens of Bexar County as the mission statement. So there's that, and then I got more involved in my daughter's band's booster board. I got 4 daughters. They've all gone through the band and the guard, so I've been head roadie for a couple of years, so I've been involved in that regard. And I just be involved in the community, because if you're not involved, you're going to be a little less authentic. People are going to be less inclined to listen to you or vote for you, much less. There's been people that run in these races that are just riding a national wave. They're all about Trump, or they're all about Biden, or something like that. But running in a local campaign is all about being involved in the community and being plugged in. For the last few years, I've done that, and I've gone to several council sessions, addressed the council a few times, been to a couple of committee meetings. My group tries to go to all 10 of the budget town halls during budget season. all 10 in all 10 districts. Um, so be involved. You have to be involved to have any credibility within the community, assuming your goal is to win or make headway of some sort. Let's see. Volunteers. Campaigns depend, in my experience, on a couple of things. Funding and volunteers. And I've been fortunate. I've been fairly content with the level of financial support I've gotten. You always want more. But if I had to pick one of them that I wish I had more of, it's volunteers. Um, and, and maybe it's just me being, what's the word, idealistic, altruistic, that I don't have enough to pay block walkers. It's been suggested to me. We don't have enough to do that. So a lot of my volunteers are truly that. A lot of them in the district, some of them from the Bear LP, some Republicans, some Democrats. Um, you know, uh, you have the volunteers. Put it this way: my opponents over the last couple of years have said they've knocked on tens of thousands of doors. I think the floor has been like 8,000 doors, all the way up to 27,000. I've heard. Um, so I heard some of those 5-figure visits this last campaign, and some of those have been from the bottom floor, the finished floor below me. We managed to touch about 3,900 homes this last time. And so when you consider that the other campaigns hit on generally twice or 3 times as much as we did, and we still were just votes away from making the runoff, it showed, first of all, how well of an operation. I think I'm proud of what me and Carter and Kelly. Carter and Kelly are my 2 main people, and then JR and Edgar were very involved. They were very helpful, as were some others. So we did well with what we had. But if that's an important metric, and if you extrapolate it, 500 more doors knocked on might have pushed us into the runoff. So it's important to get volunteers, people that will go out and knock on doors. You don't have to. A lot of people around here do mailers by hand, and they get volunteers to do that, and they do phone banking and text banking. We thought about doing text banking, and we might in the future. But phone banking and doing the mailers by hand, we just did those. Like Carter had, I think we found a place that did them, for us based on the order list we had. Just our contact at where we bought the signs, the yard signs and the road signs. So stockpile your volunteers, get as many volunteers as you possibly can. And you'll figure out soon enough those who actually will do it and mean it, and those who may just be being polite early on. Say, yeah, sure, I'll help you. I had one that sounded like she was willing to help, and in the end, she knocked on 2 doors. But people are busy. People are super busy, so that's one of the things. Just stockpile volunteers. Get as many volunteers, and that makes my next point pretty important as far as your volunteers go. If you are in a nonpartisan race, keep it that way. Don't bring the partisanship into it. It's an advantage for us. If we're honest with ourselves, it's an advantage for us to have nonpartisan races. And I've seen some people mention the party affiliation, or I've been to the last 2 state conventions and the county conventions. I mean, my second vote for president was Harry Brown. my first vote was for Ross Perot, so I already had an independent streak. Um, so I've always been philosophically libertarian as long as I've been paying attention. Um, but we all know the situation we're in. So nonpartisan races give us an opportunity um, to appeal to people with our ideas and our you know our opinions and the way things we think would improve. You're always going to get asked. You're always at the door. You're always going to get asked, "Who'd you vote for?" or "What are you?" And then then you need to figure out your own way to massage that. And actually, that's when the word libertarian is kind of beneficial, um, because in my experience, uh, when they ask me and I say libertarian, I either get, well, that's all right, that's not too bad. That's usually from Republicans. And then I had one lady tell me that said to me, if you had told me you would have voted for Trump or you're a Republican, I would slam the door in your face. It's like, all right, cool. It also doesn't help it hurt, in my opinion, to drop Ron Paul's name. I used to say I'm trying to take Ron Paul to City Hall. It's the only celebrity I ever stood in line to get a picture with. So that may just be a me thing. But leave the libertarian or even the word liberty. I focus on the word freedom. Um, leave those words at home. If you're in a nonpartisan race, if you want to get a chance to get your foot in the door, which I'm getting closer to, and I almost did. Um, and as much as I'm, do with the local party and the meetings and the socials I go to, I also have pretty good relations with a lot of people in the local GOP, including the chairman, who was very, very a lot warmer and more receptive to me than her predecessor was. Um, I have good relations with some Democrats, and being that I'm from the right in general, right, I'm more that persuasion than the left. That's not surprising, considering, in my opinion, what we've seen in recent decades. It's not that much of a surprise. Um, but leave that at the door. This is an advantage. It it levels the playing ground a little bit. You just need to learn how to massage that when it's put to you out in the wild. Um, uh, that's just my take on it. So knowing your stuff, getting as many volunteers as you can, being cognizant of whether it's a partisan or a nonpartisan race, and being involved in the community. Those are the main points that I can think of. Um, if y'all have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Maybe remind me of some other point that I should have brought up just now that I just. But since Jacob asked me this a couple months ago, those are the four, based on my experience, and I was right in the thick of it when he asked. Um, those are the 4 points that stuck with me.
I do have something maybe you can expand on. So running as a chair, you have an affiliate or a affiliate behind you in Bear County. What are you glad that Bear did, or what do you think Bear could have expanded on? What as a candidate do you need from the affiliates behind you that are pushing your campaign? Like what is it that you like the counties could do, you think the counties could do more of? Just what do you need from the counties?
Um, it's the first thing that comes to mind is support. Support in social media comes up. If you're trying to think of an example, um, I may mention to you and a couple of others that uh, JR and Edgar and JR's kids and Edgar's wife Megan were very helpful. They have been very helpful the last couple of elections, going and knocking on doors. I mean, they knocked out a lot of homes for me. They covered a decent amount of territory. Um, so getting volunteers is nice. We had in uh, the county convention one before last, we had quite a showing, and it looked promising. And you try to capitalize on those folks that are there, and some of them show up, some of them don't. Um, Having volunteers support, because want to, as a candidate, you want to maintain the high ground when there's debates or pissing matches online or social media. Um, and some of it comes from Bear LP, some of it comes from others. I always think of that Garth Brooks song, "Friends in Low Places." It's nice to have those, whether they're aggressive or just defensive. Like, hey, something going on online. Just FYI, I may have to mute occasionally. I've got an excitable German Shepherd that likes to talk to his friends out the window. Um, uh, mainly on mainly that kind of defense or support. I just go back to knocking on doors, because it being running a low, and this is not a small town either. San Antonio is not a small town. It's seventh largest, I think, almost the sixth largest city population wise in the country. And I just happen to be in a district that is very gettable, and I've told people that for a few years, and I proved it um, this last month. Um, so you know know which races are the most likely to benefit or to the most likely you're able to get, because we had Eric Leidecker. He jumped into the District 10 race this year. He was one of uh, challengers to the incumbent, a right-leaning guy. Um, District 6, where I reside, is more gettable than District 10, in my opinion, at least right now. Um, so uh, focusing on those races that are more gettable, I suppose, um, if that applies. Because we don't a lot of urban cores, urban areas, especially this size, are mostly blue. And so, not only us, but the non-incumbents, the Republicans, too, have to, in my opinion, you have to focus on the seats that are most attainable. Um, so that's the most I can think of is that, and just volunteers and being willing and able to go out and knock on doors and show up as support at forums. That's something else I just remembered. Be just bodies. Go populate the forums and the debates where your candidate is at. You don't have to stand up and ask questions. You don't have to get very involved in the forum, but be there. A show of strength, a show of numbers. Get them all campaign shirts and get them all stuff to hand out. Uh, Show up in numbers and support at these kinds of forums and stuff. And I've always gotten a pretty good amount of that. I got, you look on my Facebook page, chris4sa.com, or yeah, Facebook page. You'll see that at the San Antonio Report forum, there was I had 7 or 8 or 9 people there. David.
Hey, Chris, thanks for sharing. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right.
I played.
Hey, you mentioned your district, I think you said it was District 6,
Yes.
was more gettable than District 10. What are those characteristics? And are there ways to tailor your message if you were in District 10 trying to go after it that might change in terms of the way you present it in District 6?
Well, I say that based on how previous elections have shaken out. Because before this year, our incumbent, she lost her first race in a runoff. She won for the first time in a runoff in 2019, I believe it was. She won in a runoff. She won in 21 with just 55% of the vote against 4 challengers. And then she was reelected again in 23 with fewer, with 52 to 53, with 2 fewer candidates. So I'm just looking at the way the elections have shaken out um, to determine which districts are more gettable than the others. Um, District 10, for example, I don't think is as out of reach as other ones, but it's well known to be. It's not anymore, but there for a few cycles, it was the only one that Republicans or conservatives had. So they were a little more vigilant about defending it. And their current guy he's had give Eric credit. He brought some ethics complaints that got their councilman at least a slap on the wrist. He's also had some other issues. Um, uh, but just knowing a little bit of the history of the elections in the various districts in whatever jurisdiction you're considering, county, school board, or council, knowing how they've shaken out in prior years, that'll give you a decent idea of which ones look like they're gettable. Mine, fortunately, happens to be one. I think the other ones that have had close. There's a couple. I can think of a couple more where it's possible if you play it right. Uh, but I think it's the non-establishment types. Those of us that are trying to get in, I think we have to, in my opinion, we have to be smart about which seats we target. Of course, it doesn't really matter if you don't have somebody that volunteers to run in a authentic way. So it just depends in that regard. And then that's where it's just helpful to have a wide network of your not just local LP, but again, if we're talking on a nonpartisan level, it's important to have outreach to the other parties. Something else that JR does, and JR and Bear do a pretty good job about, the issues coalitions. So I think that's important as well, to have good relations. I don't know if that answered your question sufficiently. I hope it did. Susan, how you doing?
Just fine. This is Susan. I'm a chair of Blanco County. So you said
You're
that,
just right around here.
yeah, very close. Um, you said that you're in a nonpartisan election, that obviously you did a lot of door knocking and talking to people, and that you want to downplay party and talk more about values and issues and things like that in the nonpartisan election. So, can you name one or two things that in those conversations you had, either, knocking on people's doors and stuff, that really you think resonated with people, maybe swayed them your way? What were you think were the top things that you felt made a difference in terms of what you communicated in your campaign?
And this is where I can go back to my daughters and having roots here. Um, I'm not a native of San Antonio. I'm close to one. I was born and raised in Victoria, Texas, Patrick Mitchell's territory. Who has come up. He came up last. He donated, and he came up last cycle and block walked the weekend for us. Had such a blast that day. Um, uh, just letting them know that you're one of them, so to speak. I live here. I've been in this district for 17 years, but my daughters, all 4 of them, have gone K through 12 here. So there's, it displays, that you're here. You're not just carpetbagging. We had one of our competitors. She was put on the spot at one of the forums about how long she's been here, and she said, "Well, I've been here since 2023," and she knew that question was just not good for her. So it helps to have been there for a while, so they know that you're one of them. Um, Again, it's helpful to know what are the prominent issues of the day. And fortunately for me, being a mega tax nerd, property taxes are always an issue. And I was just that's what I spent the last day or so. That's what I was doing before I jumped on here. Is actually that's more about spending, but still, I was writing something for which I'm sure will be swiftly rejected by the Express News, like everything else. Um, uh, just knowing which issues are important, the issues of the day, and property taxes are always there. Lately, it's been aggressive dogs. When you get out and you go block walking, you see other issues like traffic issues, and when you comment to those on your social media or somewhere, you get people like, "Oh, hey, I know that curbless sidewalk he's talking about." Um, can just tell them what you've seen out in the community. You have your introduction, but you tell them what you've seen, what's important to you, what you think is important. Um, and I always lead off with, "I'm wondering if you have any questions about the election or any issues that if there's anything you'd like to air out right now." I always, I always start off. I introduce myself and tell them that I'm running for city council. And I'm wondering, hey, do you have what are your concerns? That's one of the first things I go with. And then the conversation can go from there, or they're not interested in talking. Usually, and that's where it helps to know your stuff, because if you can throw that out to them and ask them what they think, then you'll either learn something or you can speak to it. It's a win-win either way. Um, um, so just having your ear to the ground and knowing, doing your homework, looking at your surroundings whenever you're out, and always paying attention to like the sidewalk that has a gap of about this long, ground concrete, stuff like that, potholes. Um, just, be aware of what are the issues, and, the city at large and your district and this neighborhood, just paying attention really. I don't know if that the partisan label, it's gonna get put to you anyway by some people. But we have the luxury at this level of being able to start a conversation about something other than that, and just actually to have a conversation about ideas and problems and real issues without going immediately to partisan issues. I don't know if that makes sense. Did I answer your question sufficiently?
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Jeff.
This is kind of a two-part question, but both related to getting the message out. And I hope that Dave Marino will chime in on this also, since the recent success we had in El Paso with Ryan Woodcraft.
Who donated to my campaign? Thank you.
Yeah. First of all, you mentioned social media, but of course we know that there are still plenty of voters, especially older voters, that do get their information from more traditional media sources. And we also know that they tend to be biased towards the establishment and those that already have the money and spend the money on their stations. So I guess my question on that is like, what has been effective, if anything, in breaking through that and getting more traditional media attention? And then secondly, when it comes to both social media and traditional media, advertising dollars actually spent, what is the most efficient, or what has been the most effective in that area, if you've done enough of that to know like what you got tangible evidence of effectiveness on in that area too?
And that's a good question. I ran into two people I distinctly remember, one during my campaign and one when I was knocking on doors for a particular runoff. The one in my campaign, actually, I met them at the polls, her and her husband, an older, I think they're probably in their early 70s. They came and they said that you didn't know that much about you except for road signs, yada, yada, yada. And I pointed my sign and said, well, there's ChristopherSA.com. No, we don't have internet. I was like, and I was thinking to myself, I don't know how to get to you, except for those road signs. road signs are important. Um, you know, for those kinds of folks. I had another one that said they generally follow the recommendations of the San Antonio Express News. They made such fools out of themselves in my district, but that's another story. They have a habit of doing that. Um, um, we took out an ad 2 years ago in a one of those like very local like community papers you see on the rack in Valero. Um, I don't know that that did much good. I don't. We didn't go back to it this time. Um, I tried to get more active this time on Nextdoor, um, and you can only do so much. Although it's important to remember that Nextdoor does not allow national and state politics in the general feed, but they do allow local stuff. You still, if any of you all have any experience with them, you still have to be kind of careful because they are they are tight on their standards. Um, so you get more involved in Nextdoor. I'm mostly on Facebook, and I used to boost years ago just to try to promote the stuff I had written, which I'll get to in a second. Um, and that just is so cumbersome. I don't know if y'all are familiar with it, but I personally, and I've heard this from people who've actually broken through, and I broke through, but the requirements that they have to to boost out stuff, I'm just like, holy smokes, it's a big hurdle on Facebook. Um, um, one of my daughters set up an Instagram account for me this time, and JR and Carter got Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter or X all hooked up to where when I posted on one, boom, it would go to the other two. Um, so that's helpful. Now, if they're not on social media, traditional media, that makes it, something else a lot of people suggest doing around here is getting on the radio, calling in. And uh, some of us can't do that or at work. I personally can't do it because I need to be focusing on what I'm doing. But a lot of people, a lot of local activists will get on, call into KTSA, and they'll talk about candidates. And I was actually I was a guest on one 2 years ago, and it went really well. Um, so hang around the radio, the talk radio, if you can. Get on there if you can, and just by calling in, not paying for ads or anything. You can do that if you want, but again, when you're talking about a city like this, we're not going to pay for radio or TV ads because that gets blasted out all over the place, and the effectiveness of the dollars you spend are a little bit polluted. Um, we never went that way. It was too expensive anyway. Um, I'm fortunate to be a super nerd in that I learned in grad school that I can actually I can put a few words together in an essay that newspapers and outlets will run. If you go, you'll find my stuff on Mises.org, Real Clear Markets, Fee.org, San Antonio Express News. You can scribble out an article, somewhat, a decent article, obviously free of grammatical and spelling mistakes, but with some flow. If you can do that, that's a good way, to build up a little awareness of you and your brand and your ideas. Then it's a matter of getting past the crypt keepers of the editorial pages, which has been a challenge for me around here these last couple of years. Radio, TV is not, there's very little chance of that unless you put yourself in those situations. Like, I was one of the TV stations came to where my party was on election night, and I got on there on KSAT. That went pretty well. Uh, Hanging around the talk shows, calling in, being a presence there. As soon as you get in, when you get in, say, "Hey, I'm running for this," I have a take on that. That should get you right in. But you just got to have almost wide coverage of on social media just to get the word out, and that includes next door. So touch as many as you can, and just go from there.
Does anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask? Or Chris, you got some more you want to talk about?
No, that's I've unloaded as much as I can, as much as I plan. Those are good questions. Yeah, people will pick up. The locals will pick up on who you're mostly affiliated with politically. The smarter ones, the student ones will pick up on that. There's really no need to go to that. There's like I said, people see me working. This is the first time in a couple of years I haven't worked the Pride booth. I go to Juneteenth, manning the LP booth. If you're out and about, hanging with your kindred spirits, people will know that. But that'll be activists. If you're going to voters, most of them won't, and so just like I said, just leave that at the door in nonpartisan races. We have an advantage in that regard. Susan.
So I was just wondering, in terms of what tools LP Texas offers, you talked about block walking. Did you use anything? And I think you talked about wanting to do texting, maybe text banking in the future. Have you used any of like Nation Builder? Did you use any of that? Was any of that helpful? Did you feel like it was accessible, or is that something that you'd like to use more of in the future?
Well, since you brought him up, before I forget about it, Andrew is very helpful. I got a decent amount. I got good support from state folks, including Jacob. I talked about Patrick. We used something called, I think it's called L2. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what it's called. Block walking software. I don't remember about 2023, but this time that supplied us with information that we were able to use not only for block walking but also on our mailers. And I liked it. It was fairly user friendly. Not many complaints there. It's easy to explain. I think most people got it. There's a couple quirks or glitches, but L2 that was good. That worked pretty well. I think you get the voter information from your local county. The state, I got state and the national. I think were supportive. They put me out there front and center. I've seen that good party. I've seen them on Facebook as well. To local printers, local printer that is usually turns stuff around quickly. Is block walking kind of what you were asking about, Susan? Was there?
Yeah, I was just curious as to what you felt in terms of these types of tools that are out there, what you felt was good for you in a more local election. So yeah.
L2 work. I mean, I would go back to it again without hesitancy. It worked out pretty well.
I'm gonna jump in.
We got a dump of the information both times, and I've kind of looked at them and thought about reaching out to some supporters. It only has phone number, not email, but just saying, hey, if you have any issues or you want to reach out, you can always, this is my direct number, blah, blah, blah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm going to jump in front of you. Hold on. I'm jumping in front of you real quick.
Go ahead.
With this time, I know y'all used L2 data. Did y'all try out the voter gravity this cycle, or did y'all stick with L2?
Voter, say gravity?
Yeah, voter gravity. It was something
sounds
that
familiar.
Texas
It sounds familiar, but I
this cycle.
don't think we I seem to remember Carter and maybe JR mentioning that before, but
Okay.
we didn't use it for anything.
I was going to try to see if get some feedback from you on that. I was going to see how it worked, but if y'all didn't use it, then I get it. All right. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I was just curious about candidate forums. Were there opportunities? Did you participate in them? What are your thoughts on those?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's all I did in 21. I mean, I was still in my hermit phase, but two things I was doing, things I was doing was I was writing a bunch. And then I was going to these forums and just, because before that, I didn't know anybody on the local level. Nobody knew me. 'Cause I was, like I said, I was just focusing on DC and international trade and that kind of stuff when I would write and get published. So the local thing wasn't happening in my mind, in my world. Uh, so the forums were my way of going and announcing my presence. Um, and I got invited to forums, nonpartisan, conservative, liberal. Um, there was some complaints about me being invited to the liberals, which was kind of
Complaints from
amusing.
who?
What's that?
Complaints from who?
Democrats.
Uh,
They were
I see.
saying we don't get invited to theirs, and
They,
when they said theirs,
they
they
didn't
were
want
saying,
any new ideas being introduced, huh?
yeah, they were saying when they said their, they were talking mostly. I mean, we're in a Republican Democrat world. They were talking mostly about Republican. I said no, there was two of them here that got invited to a couple Republican ones that I went to, so they didn't know what the hell they were talking about. Um, so yeah, if you put you assuming assuming you fill out your application correctly, you'll get invited. And I say correctly because in 21, I put the wrong email address on my application. I put at gmail.com instead of at Chris Becker because I had my own website. And I was kicking myself about that. But I still did get invited to plenty of forums, especially once I introduced myself. Um, so yeah, that's going to forums. Some people don't do it, and I think I can see why. They may give me another excuse, but it, it it's like a crash course in what is it called? Toastmasters, I think it's what it's called. Um, the debating club, I think it is. Um, it gives you, it helps you, it preps you. You're throwing yourself off in the deep end for sure because when I've been in a class, I've been in the college classroom for 12 years now. And just the last year, I've been in the high school, middle school classroom. When I'm in there, I'm completely comfortable because that's my world. I imagine myself like Chris Rock stalking the stage at a comedy show. That's my world. I'm comfortable there because those are kids that are wanting to learn. Running a campaign is different because a lot of people, they're voters, they're activists. Some of them are as jaded as I am, as maybe you are. It's a little tougher audience, but it benefits you in that regard. So yeah, me personally, not a lot of the forums take away from block blocking because they happen in the evening. So that's a kind of a bogus reason that I heard some people say why they don't go. Um, but I definitely recommend going to the forums and the debates and and this is easier said than done because I still get nervous and I had an episode like that this time by getting that question to something you don't know about and that that worries me before I go to these things. And sure
Right.
enough, this being my third time, I still got one of those questions this last time. And of course, maybe it's just me being cocky, but I'm thinking it was a dumb question. Why you put me on the spot with that? Pay attention.
Yeah. You
Um,
mentioned Toastmasters and in relation to forums, and that brought up a memory. I ran for U.S. Congress back in the 1990s, and I accepted an invitation to a forum, and I went in, somewhat cocky, obviously somewhat anxious, but thinking that who can speak better on the issues that are important to me than myself. and I got on stage and I was a stammering idiot, and that inspired me to join Toastmasters. But you don't hear, at least in my part of Texas, you don't hear that much about Toastmasters much anymore. I don't
Where
know if
exact
they're active in San Antonio or not, but
where
they're a good
exactly are
thing
you?
if excuse me,
Where exactly are you?
I'm in Orange, Texas, on the Texas-Louisiana border.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I would recommend that to any candidate if you don't have much practice with public speaking that and you have access to Toastmasters Club. It's certainly a way
Oh,
to get more comfortable.
yeah, yeah. I've heard that. I didn't, and the only, like I said, the only experience I had at that time was 5 or 6 years worth of teaching. But it's a different crowd, and you're throwing yourself on the deep end, but it's necessary. Something else I would, and pardon me if I'm getting too off what you were hoping for, Jacob, but I'm thinking not just from party chairs and whatnot, but just in general candidates. You might feel compelled to start talking about stuff that are not relevant, are not germane to the conversation. My team has had to tell me more than once to go easy about the talk about my daughters because I can get distracted and go down that rabbit hole. But eventually, you find a way to make it work. But the forums, I would strongly suggest because it gets you, it steals you. You know, it's like I said, it's going off the deep end, but it gives you a good experience because you're gonna have to do that anyway. If you're up on the dais, if you're addressing a crowd, that's part of the gig, and it has gotten easier for me over time. And this time, this earlier this spring, I could feel myself getting better at it. But that also requires you being plugged into what's going on for your particular race that you're running. The more you're plugged in, the stronger your philosophical background, your theoretical grounding. You know, you just be cocky to an extent and go up there and own it. And like I said, again, easier said than done, but definitely go to the forums and Toastmasters. You can get something like that going, or sign up for something like that. That would probably be beneficial too.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Chris. It doesn't look like there are any more questions. So